I had always been the kind of person who liked to solve problems, even as a kid. Whether it was fixing broken toys or figuring out how to get my bicycle chain back on track, I loved the challenge. But it wasn't until later that I realized how much of that problem-solving attitude could apply to business. It all started when I was working a regular 9-to-5 job at a marketing agency. The work was fine, but it never sparked the excitement I craved. After spending a few years there, I began to feel like I was just going through the motions, day in and day out. It wasn't the job itself that bothered me, but the lack of ownership over my time and future. I had a decent salary and benefits, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more out there for me. One night, after a particularly exhausting day, I was scrolling through Reddit when I came across a post about side hustles. It was a collection of stories from people who had started businesses while holding down full-time jobs. Some had launched online stores, others had started content creation careers, and there were even a few who had launched successful service-based businesses. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I had never even considered the possibility of starting my own business. The idea started to take root. I began doing research, staying up late reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and soaking in as much information as I could. I knew that the leap from employee to entrepreneur wasn't going to be easy, but I was determined to give it a shot. I decided to focus on something I already knew a bit about: digital marketing. At the time, businesses were beginning to realize just how important an online presence was, and many small companies were struggling to effectively market themselves online. I had the skills to help these businesses, but I needed to find a way to stand out in an increasingly crowded market. After weeks of brainstorming, I came up with an idea. I would start a digital marketing consultancy focused on helping small businesses create and optimize their online presence. I put together a simple website, started networking with local business owners, and offered my services for a ridiculously low price just to build my portfolio. It was a slow start. The first few months were tough, and I was barely making enough to cover my rent. I was juggling my full-time job with my side hustle, working nights and weekends, but I kept pushing through. In those early days, I made a lot of mistakes. I didn't fully understand how to price my services, I spent too much time on things that didn't matter, and I struggled with time management. There were moments when I questioned whether it was all worth it. But there were also small victories, like when a local coffee shop owner told me that my work had helped increase their sales, or when a restaurant owner sent me an email thanking me for the new customers they were getting because of the online ad campaign I had designed for them. That feedback fueled my passion. I began to realize that this wasn't just about the money, it was about helping businesses grow. It felt so much more rewarding than anything I had ever done in my full-time job. Slowly, my client list started to grow. My part-time hustle was turning into something that felt like it could be a full-time business. But then came the hard decision. Should I quit my day job and go all in on the business? My full-time job was stable, and the benefits were great. But at the same time, I could feel myself slowly losing the will to keep working for someone else. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about wanting the freedom to build something of my own. After a lot of back and forth, I finally made the decision to take the leap. I gave my 2 weeks' notice at the agency and went full-time into my business. I won't lie, it was terrifying. Suddenly, there were no guaranteed paychecks coming in, no health insurance, no 401k. It was just me, my laptop, and a pile of business cards. But I was ready to put everything I had into making it work. The first year was a grind. I spent my days working on client projects, and my nights and weekends were spent marketing my business, creating content, and trying to get more clients. I learned quickly that owning a business isn't just about doing the work. It's about constantly hustling to find new opportunities and figuring out how to scale. One of the best things I did early on was to build a network of mentors and other entrepreneurs. I joined a few online communities for business owners, and I started reaching out to people who had been in the game longer than I had. The advice and support I got were invaluable. One of my mentors, an experienced marketing consultant, helped me navigate some of the early challenges. He taught me how to streamline my operations, how to better manage my time, and, most importantly, how to charge what I was worth. By the end of the second year, I had hired a small team to help with some of the workload. I brought on a content writer, a social media manager, and an administrative assistant. I was finally at a point where I could step back from the day-to-day tasks and focus on growing the business even further. I started working on larger contracts, partnering with bigger companies, and refining my service offerings. Today, my business is thriving. I'm now running a successful digital marketing agency with a full team and a roster of clients that includes some big names. I still remember how hard those first few years were, but the struggle was worth it. I've learned so much along the way, not just about business, but about myself. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that failure isn't the end, it's just part of the journey. There were times when I thought I was going to crash and burn, but each failure taught me something valuable. Every mistake made me stronger, more adaptable, and more determined. I also learned that success doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, effort, and a lot of hard work. There were no shortcuts, no secret formulas. It was just me, my drive, and my willingness to keep pushing forward, even when the odds seemed stacked against me. Looking back, I can hardly believe how far I've come. I built something that allows me to live life on my own terms, and I'm proud of the impact my business has had on my clients' success. More than anything, I'm grateful for the freedom to wake up every day and do something I'm truly passionate about. If there's one piece of advice I would give to anyone thinking about starting their own business, it's this: don't be afraid to take the leap. The road won't be easy, but the rewards are worth it. Stay persistent, learn from your mistakes, and never stop believing in yourself. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I started my entrepreneurial journey when I was 23. Fresh out of college, I had the typical dreams of becoming a millionaire, living in a mansion, and cruising through life without the constant worry of bills or deadlines. But like many, I quickly realized that the world of business wasn't as glamorous as it looked from the outside. The idea of becoming successful came with a ton of failures, missteps, and moments when I genuinely questioned whether I was cut out for this. It all began when I realized that my degree in marketing wasn't going to guarantee me a stable job in the ever-competitive job market. I had interned at a few companies during college, and while I had learned a lot, none of them excited me. I worked under managers who seemed as lost as I was, and I saw coworkers going through the motions, stuck in jobs they didn't love. It was clear to me that corporate life wasn't the dream I had imagined. So, at 23, I made the decision to go out on my own. I didn't have much money to start with. I had a few $1,000s saved from my part-time jobs and freelance gigs, but it wasn't enough to make any serious moves. I needed a business idea that could not only be profitable, but also one that would keep me engaged and passionate. I thought long and hard about my own experiences and realized that there was one thing I had a lot of: knowledge about social media marketing. I had built a decent following on Instagram during college by posting about things that interested me, mainly fitness and travel. People loved the content, and I received messages daily asking for advice on how to grow a following or improve engagement. After doing some research, I realized there was a massive demand for social media coaching. Small businesses and even individuals wanted to grow their online presence but didn't know where to start. That's when I decided to launch my own social media consulting business. The first few months were rough. I had 0 clients. I posted on Instagram and LinkedIn about my services, but no one seemed interested. I spent hours every day reaching out to potential clients, local small businesses, personal brands, even influencers, but I received almost no responses. I felt disheartened, especially when I saw other people posting success stories of how they made thousands of dollars with their businesses in the first few weeks. I began to question whether I had made a huge mistake. Then, one day, I got a breakthrough. A small local coffee shop responded to one of my cold emails. They wanted help boosting their Instagram presence. They weren't looking for a huge strategy overhaul, just some tips on creating more engaging posts and how to use Instagram stories more effectively. It was a small project, but it was something. I worked tirelessly on their account for a month, tweaking their posts, offering strategies, and increasing their followers from 500 to 1,500. The engagement improved, and the owner was thrilled. That one project led to more. The coffee shop referred me to a few of their friends who owned other local businesses, and from there, my network started to grow. Slowly, I began to build a reputation. My clients were getting results, and word of mouth spread like wildfire. By the end of my first year in business, I had a steady stream of clients and was making more money than I ever did in any job I had before. But things didn't get easier. As my business grew, so did the pressure. At one point, I was working with 20 clients at once. I was doing everything: content creation, analytics, email management, you name it. My days were packed from dawn to dusk, and I started to feel the weight of burnout creeping in. I realized that I had built something successful, but I was running it into the ground by trying to do everything myself. I knew that if I wanted to scale, I needed to delegate. So, I hired my first employee, a part-time assistant who helped with administrative tasks. That was a game changer. With someone taking care of the mundane tasks, I was able to focus more on growing the business. I also started outsourcing content creation and graphic design to freelancers, which gave me more time to strategize and work on the bigger picture. Over the next couple of years, my business kept growing, and I started to specialize in working with startups. They were hungry for results but didn't have the budget for large marketing agencies. I positioned myself as someone who could offer personalized, results-driven strategies that were affordable but effective. My reputation as a reliable consultant continued to spread, and I gained more and more clients. But with every new client came new challenges, higher expectations, bigger workloads, and the constant pressure to deliver. Then came the turning point. One of my clients, a startup tech company, had their product launch. They were relying on me to get the word out and generate buzz. I created a detailed social media campaign, executed it flawlessly, and within days, the startup had more traffic and sales than they had anticipated. It was a game changer for them. They raised millions in funding shortly after, and the founder reached out to thank me. He told me that my social media campaign was the key factor that helped them secure the funding. That was the moment when everything clicked. I realized that the work I was doing wasn't just about increasing likes or follows. It was about helping businesses grow, thrive, and achieve their dreams. My services were making a tangible difference. From then on, I shifted my focus. I stopped thinking about social media as just a marketing tool and started seeing it as a powerful driver of business growth. I began to offer more than just consulting. I started offering full-service digital marketing solutions, including paid ads, influencer partnerships, and website optimization. As I grew more successful, I also became more strategic about how I ran the business. I implemented systems and processes that allowed me to handle larger projects without sacrificing quality. I built a team of skilled professionals who could take over areas I wasn't an expert in, like paid advertising and data analytics. We worked together to create customized marketing plans for each client, taking into account their goals, industry, and audience. Today, my business is thriving. I now run a digital marketing agency with a team of 15 employees. We have clients all over the country, and I'm proud of the work we do. I've learned so much over the years, not just about marketing, but about perseverance, self-doubt, and what it truly takes to succeed in business. The road hasn't been easy, but looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. If there's one thing I've learned on this journey, it's that entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. Success doesn't come overnight, and failure isn't something to fear, it's something to learn from. Keep pushing, keep learning, and keep improving. And most importantly, believe in yourself, because if you don't, no one else will. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other. We didn't have much, but what we did have was community. I remember my family's old house, a place that felt like it was on the brink of falling apart most of the time. The walls were thin, the roof leaked when it rained, and the heating was so bad that during winters, we all huddled under blankets just to stay warm. But what we had in abundance was love, and my parents worked incredibly hard to give me and my sister a better life than they had. My parents never finished high school. My dad dropped out to help his family after his father passed away, and my mom worked at a factory, doing what she could to support us. They were tough, but it was hard to keep up with bills. I learned very early that money was something you had to work for, and, even then, it never seemed like there was enough of it. By the time I was 16, I was already looking for ways to make money outside of the odd jobs I did around the neighborhood, mowing lawns, babysitting, helping people with their groceries. That's when I got the idea that would change my life. I started buying cheap, broken electronics and fixing them. At first, it was just a way to make a quick buck, but the more I did it, the more I realized there was something here. I had a knack for fixing things that others couldn't. I started reselling them online for a profit. It wasn't easy, though. At the time, I didn't have a lot of money, so I had to make do with what I had. My workshop was my bedroom, where I'd carefully disassemble old phones, laptops, and other gadgets. I would watch YouTube tutorials to learn how to replace screens, fix charging ports, and clean out broken circuitry. It was frustrating at first. I had more than one item break beyond repair because I didn't know what I was doing. But that didn't stop me. I kept going, learning from my mistakes, and slowly building a reputation as someone who could fix electronics. My big break came when I bought a broken iPhone 6 from a guy for $50. It was in terrible shape, scratched up, broken screen, the whole 9 yards. But something told me it was worth trying. I spent a week fixing it, replacing the screen, cleaning the parts, and making sure everything was working perfectly. When I sold it for $250, I realized something. I had just made a $200 profit on something I had fixed with my own two hands. That was the moment I knew I had something special. Over the next few months, I took any extra cash I had and reinvested it into more broken electronics. I got better at the repairs, and soon, I wasn't just buying phones. I was buying anything and everything that was broken and fixing it. I even started learning about more advanced electronics, like game consoles and computers. I was making more money than I ever thought possible. But even though I was doing well, I knew that working from home forever wasn't going to get me to where I wanted to go. The business needed to grow. I needed to scale up. So, at 18, I did something that terrified me. I took the $5,000 I had saved up and opened a small shop. The first few months were brutal. I had no idea how to run a business. I had no experience in marketing, no idea how to keep track of finances, and definitely no clue about dealing with customers. My shop was located in a less-than-ideal area, nothing fancy, just a small rented storefront on a busy street. The rent was high, the bills piled up, and I still didn't have enough customers to make it profitable. I had to learn on the fly. I started looking up everything I could about running a business, reading books, watching videos, and even asking other entrepreneurs for advice. I wasn't shy about learning from anyone who had been there before me. It wasn't until I started offering services that went beyond just repairs, like providing warranties and helping customers recover data from damaged devices, that my shop started to attract attention. The word got around, and customers started coming in. Some people brought their devices in for repairs, others came in just to ask questions or get advice. My customer base grew, and I started to turn a profit. But that's when things really got interesting. One day, a man walked into my shop with a broken gaming console, looking for a repair. We started talking, and he casually mentioned that he worked with a company that sold refurbished electronics in bulk. He told me they were looking for someone reliable to handle repairs for them. My heart skipped a beat. This was my chance to get my business to the next level. I told him I was interested, and we agreed to meet the following week. It wasn't an easy partnership to get. We had to negotiate the price per item, the delivery times, and several other details. But eventually, we struck a deal. I started receiving shipments of broken electronics from this company, and with my team, we fixed them up and shipped them back. What was once a small shop repairing a few items a day had turned into a full-blown operation. From there, things just kept growing. The company I partnered with started sending me more and more work, and I began hiring more people to help with the repairs. I also started offering additional services like data recovery and bulk repairs for businesses. I invested heavily in marketing, making sure my business was visible online and through local advertisements. By the time I was 24, I had expanded into a larger location. I went from repairing a handful of devices to fixing hundreds of them each month. The company I had partnered with became a major client, and my business was now servicing various other corporate clients as well. I went from being a kid fixing broken phones in my bedroom to running a multi-location business with dozens of employees. There were tough moments along the way, no doubt about it. There were times when I almost gave up, when the bills piled up, when the repairs were too complicated, or when a deal fell through. But every time I felt like quitting, I reminded myself where I started. I remembered the old house I grew up in, the struggles my family had, and the promise I made to myself to never settle for less. Today, I run a successful electronics repair and refurbishment company. We repair everything from phones to computers, gaming consoles, and even industrial electronics. We're not just in my hometown anymore, either. We've expanded to several cities. And it all started because I wasn't afraid to start small, learn as I went, and invest in my future. There's one thing I always remind myself. No matter how tough things get, you can always find a way out. You just have to be willing to put in the work. I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. In fact, for the longest time, I didn't even consider the possibility. I was a regular guy working a 9-to-5 job like most people, clocking in, clocking out, and wondering if there was something more to life than just getting by. But what I didn't realize at the time was that one small decision would change everything. It all started when I was 27. I had a steady job in sales at a tech company. The pay was decent, the benefits were good, and I had a comfortable, predictable life. But deep down, I was restless. I felt like I wasn't living up to my potential. Every time I saw someone launch a business, especially in the tech world, I'd think to myself, why can't that be me? But that's all I did, think about it. I never acted on it. One afternoon, while I was sitting in my cubicle, something clicked. It wasn't anything special, just a random thought, really, but it felt different. I was browsing through social media when I saw an ad for a startup competition. It was one of those when $10,000 investment for your startup idea kind of things. I don't know what possessed me, but I found myself clicking the link. I remember staring at the application form for a good 10 minutes, asking myself, am I really doing this? At that moment, I decided to apply. No business plan, no idea, just a vague, half-formed thought. But I didn't care. I figured, worst case, I'd learn something from the process. The application deadline was in 3 days, so I quickly threw together a rough pitch for a tech product I had been thinking about for months. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was something I felt could solve a problem I had been dealing with personally. I hit submit, and for the next few weeks, I tried not to think about it too much. I didn't want to get my hopes up. I didn't have any background in entrepreneurship or startups. Heck, I hadn't even taken a business course in college. My expertise was in sales, not product development. But then, I got an email. I had been selected to pitch my idea in front of a panel of investors. That's when the panic set in. I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't even know how to build a product. The next few days were a blur of frantic Googling, reaching out to people in my network, and doing everything I could to learn about the basics of product development, business models, and pitching to investors. I took a few online courses, read books, and watched every TED Talk I could find. The day of the pitch arrived, and I was a nervous wreck. I showed up early, dressed in my best suit, which was probably more expensive than it needed to be. I remember sitting in the waiting area, feeling completely out of place. There were people there who had actual experience in tech and startups. They had teams, they had plans, they knew what they were talking about. Meanwhile, I was just this guy with a half-baked idea. When my name was called, I stood up, walked into the room, and faced a panel of 5 investors. I was trembling, my palms sweaty, but I forced myself to take a deep breath and started talking. I don't even remember everything I said. I was just trying to get the words out. But to my surprise, they were interested. They asked questions, they dug deeper into my idea, and they seemed to like what I was presenting. By the end of the pitch, they offered me the $10,000 investment. I couldn't believe it. They didn't just see me as some guy with a good idea, they believed in me. I left that pitch feeling like I had just won the lottery. But the reality hit me quickly. I didn't have a product, I didn't have a team, and I didn't know how to turn this idea into a business. That $10,000 was a start, but it was far from enough to get everything off the ground. I needed to figure out how to make this work. Over the next few months, I began building the product. I found a software developer who was willing to work with me on a limited budget. I started designing a prototype, working nights and weekends while still keeping my day job. There were so many times I wanted to give up. There were times when nothing seemed to work, when the product wasn't coming together, and when I thought I was in over my head. But I kept pushing. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we had a working prototype. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. I decided to launch a beta version of the product to test the waters. To my surprise, people actually signed up. They liked what we were offering. They saw the potential. But as things started to pick up, my 9-to-5 job became more of a hindrance than a help. I was juggling my day job with running a startup, and it was taking a toll. I was exhausted, and I started to wonder how long I could keep up this double life. I knew that if I wanted to take this business seriously, I had to make a choice. One evening, I came home from work, sat down with my wife, and told her everything. I was ready to quit my job and go all in on the business. It was a huge leap of faith, but she supported me 100%. The next day, I handed in my resignation letter. The early days of full-time entrepreneurship were brutal. There were months when the money wasn't coming in, when I was struggling to balance the demands of the business and the stress of living paycheck to paycheck. But somehow we made it through. I kept refining the product, improving the user experience, and listening to customer feedback. Slowly but surely, the business began to grow. We gained traction, and the revenue started to come in. A year after leaving my job, we had reached a point where I could finally afford to hire a small team. I brought on a few developers, a marketing expert, and a customer service rep. We were no longer just a side project. I had created a real company. Now, looking back, I can't believe how far we've come. The product we built has helped thousands of businesses solve real problems, and we're still growing. I still get nervous sometimes, and I still don't have all the answers. But I've learned that being an entrepreneur is about taking risks, learning from your mistakes, and never giving up. If you'd asked me a few years ago if I ever thought I'd be running my own business, I would have laughed. But here I am. And if I can do it, anyone can. I had always been the type of person who was never satisfied with the traditional 9 to 5 grind. I remember working at my first corporate job out of college. The excitement of having a stable paycheck and benefits quickly faded as I realized I was more of a cog in the machine than an individual with potential. The job was fine, but I felt like I was trading my soul for security. I had big dreams, but my circumstances didn't exactly scream entrepreneur. I was living in a small apartment, drowning in student loans, and barely scraping by with my salary. But I always knew deep down that I was meant to do more. So, I started looking for ways to get out. My first step was to find something that I could do on the side, something that might offer the freedom I craved while still maintaining my job. That's when I discovered dropshipping. At first, I was completely naive. I saw people on social media claiming to make thousands of dollars a month from their dropshipping stores. I figured it was a simple process. Find some trending product, set up a Shopify store, run a few ads, and boom, instant success. I wish I could say it was that easy, but my journey was far from smooth. I spent hours researching products and learning about online marketing. I found a supplier, set up my first store, and started pouring money into Facebook ads. But instead of the sales rolling in, I was met with silence. My ads weren't converting, and the few visitors I did get bounced off the site faster than I could say conversion rate. I didn't give up, though. I went back to the drawing board. I refined my product selection, adjusted my website design, and tested different ad strategies. For every mistake, I learned something valuable. I joined online forums, watched YouTube tutorials, and reached out to others who had been in the game longer than me. Slowly but surely, things started to click. My first sale felt like a huge victory, and from there, things began to snowball. I still remember the moment when I made my first $100 profit in a single day. It wasn't much, but it was proof that I could actually make this work. The taste of success was intoxicating. I began to imagine what it would be like if I could scale this business, quit my job, and be my own boss. But then came the challenge that every entrepreneur faces, the dreaded burnout. I had been working my corporate job during the day, running my dropshipping store at night, and managing a growing social media presence. There were days when I didn't sleep, working around the clock just to keep things running. As the sales grew, so did the pressure. The stress was taking a toll on my health, and my relationships began to suffer. It was around this time that I realized I needed help. I couldn't do it all on my own. I hired a virtual assistant to handle some of the tasks that were consuming my time. That decision alone was a game changer. I was able to focus more on strategy and growth, while my assistant took care of the day-to-day operations. I also brought on a graphic designer to help with branding and a social media manager to handle the growing demand for content. With a solid team in place, I was able to focus on scaling the business. I started reinvesting profits into better marketing strategies, more products, and higher quality customer service. It wasn't long before I hit a significant milestone, $10,000 in revenue in a single month. That felt like a dream come true. But even with this success, I knew I wasn't there yet. I still had to make the leap from side hustle to full-time entrepreneur. The next few months were a blur of sleepless nights, long hours, and constant learning. I grew my store, expanded into new niches, and launched my own product line. My income skyrocketed, but so did the complexity of running the business. I had to hire even more people to keep up with demand, and eventually, I took the plunge and quit my job. The feeling of freedom was indescribable. I was finally my own boss. As my business continued to grow, I faced new challenges that I hadn't anticipated. Managing employees was a skill I had to learn on the fly. I had to become a better leader, making sure that my team was motivated, aligned with the company's vision, and accountable for their roles. It wasn't always easy, and there were times when I questioned whether I was cut out for it. But I pushed through, learning from every mistake and seeking advice from mentors. One of the biggest turning points in my entrepreneurial journey came when I made the decision to focus on building a brand rather than just selling products. I realized that people were more likely to buy from companies they trusted, And the key to building trust was to offer value beyond the products themselves. I started creating content that resonated with my audience, sharing tips, tutorials, and behind-the-scenes looks into the business. I also focused on providing exceptional customer service, going above and beyond to ensure that every customer was satisfied. As the brand grew, so did my revenue. But the real success wasn't just the money, it was the impact I was having. I was able to hire more people, support my family, and contribute to causes I cared about. I also began to give back to the entrepreneur community, sharing my story and offering advice to those who were just starting out. Looking back, I realized that entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. There were countless times when I wanted to give up, when the stress seemed unbearable, and when failure felt imminent. But each time I faced a setback, I learned something new. I became more resilient, more resourceful, and more determined to succeed. I'm proud of how far I've come, but I know that the journey is far from over. There are always new challenges to face, new lessons to learn, and new opportunities to seize. But I wouldn't trade this life for anything. The freedom, the excitement, and the ability to build something of my own, there's nothing quite like it. For anyone thinking about starting their own business, I'd say this: don't expect overnight success. It's going to take time, effort, and a lot of hard work. But if you're persistent, willing to learn, and able to adapt, you can make it happen. I'm living proof of that. It's not easy, but it's worth it. I never thought I'd end up here. I always thought entrepreneurship was something for the lucky or the gifted. My name's Nick, and my journey started in the most unexpected of places, a small, dilapidated house on the edge of a tiny town. I wasn't born into wealth or surrounded by tech geniuses, but I always had an itch to do more than just survive. I grew up with a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to make ends meet. We didn't have much. Our idea of luxury was having enough to pay the bills and maybe a bit extra for a rare treat. But as a kid, I learned the value of resilience early on. My mom would tell me stories about how she had to hustle to get by, and how every setback was just a setup for a comeback. Those words stuck with me. But still, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I wasn't a great student. I wasn't athletic, and I definitely wasn't the creative type. What I did have was a sense of curiosity. I was always tinkering with things, trying to figure out how they worked. I would take apart old electronics and try to rebuild them, usually unsuccessfully, but the act of creating something from nothing fascinated me. After high school, I bounced around between a few odd jobs. Nothing really clicked. I worked at a call center, did some construction work, and even tried my hand at selling insurance. None of it felt right. At some point, I hit a wall. I was 26, stuck in a dead-end job that didn't challenge me, and felt like I was living someone else's life. My friends had moved on. Some had families, some had careers. Me? I was still stuck, barely scraping by. It was during a late-night conversation with a friend that things started to shift. He had started a small online business selling custom t-shirts. At first, I thought it was a joke. A t-shirt business? How could something so simple become successful? But as he explained the ins and outs of his venture, I started to see the potential. It wasn't about the product. It was about creating something people could relate to, something people wanted to buy. I was intrigued. But, like most people, I was hesitant. I didn't have much money to invest. I had no experience running a business, and the thought of diving into something I knew so little about was terrifying. But then I remembered what my mom had taught me. Every setback is a setup for a comeback. I started small. I didn't go all in at first. I sold some old electronics I no longer needed, used the money to buy a basic design tool, and started experimenting with creating my own shirts. I spent hours learning about printing methods, sourcing materials, and building a website. It wasn't glamorous. I spent countless nights on Google, reading articles, watching tutorials, and making mistakes. My first designs were awful. I had no idea how to market them. My website looked like it was built by a 12-year-old in 1999. But I didn't let any of that stop me. I launched my store on a shoestring budget. The first month, I didn't make a single sale. Not one. It was crushing, but I refused to quit. I reached out to friends and family, asking them to help me promote my store. I did everything from posting on social media to joining online groups to get my name out there. Slowly but surely, things started to pick up. People started buying my shirts. Not a lot, but enough to make me think this might actually work. Then, something unexpected happened. One of my designs went viral. I had created a shirt with a quirky, sarcastic slogan that resonated with people in a way I hadn't anticipated. It took off overnight. sales exploded, and I was suddenly dealing with a flood of orders I couldn't keep up with. The business went from a small side hustle to a full-blown operation in what felt like the blink of an eye. I had to adapt quickly. I outsourced the printing and shipping, hired a few people to help with customer service, and started investing in better equipment to scale up production. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. As the business grew, so did the challenges. I had to deal with angry customers, delivery delays, design mistakes, and even competitors who started copying my designs. There were nights when I thought about throwing in the towel. But every time I felt like giving up, I remembered the lessons I had learned: resilience, persistence, and the belief that setbacks are part of the process. The turning point came when I decided to take a risk and invest in a proper marketing strategy. I hired a social media manager and a content creator to help build my brand. This was a huge leap for me because it meant spending money I didn't have, but it paid off. We ran targeted ads, collaborated with influencers, and built a loyal community around the brand. Sales skyrocketed even more. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. The business that started as a tiny t-shirt shop is now a full-fledged e-commerce brand with a range of products. I've expanded into other merchandise, including hoodies, mugs, and even limited edition collectibles. We've reached customers in over 30 countries, and the business is growing faster than ever. It's crazy to think that just a few years ago, I was sitting in a call center, wondering if I'd ever find a way out of my rut. But the real payoff wasn't the money. It wasn't the fame. It was the freedom. I get to wake up every morning and do something I love. I've built a team of people who share my vision, and we're all working towards the same goal: creating products that people genuinely enjoy and building a brand that means something to them. Along the way, I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned that success isn't about being perfect or getting everything right the first time. It's about having the courage to take that first step, even when you don't have all the answers. It's about learning from failure, adjusting, and pushing forward, even when things seem impossible. It's about never giving up on the dream, no matter how long it takes. Looking back, I realized that every moment of struggle, every setback, and every failure was necessary to get me to where I am today. It wasn't luck. It wasn't timing. It was hard work, persistence, and the ability to keep going even when the odds were stacked against me. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that you don't have to have a lot of money or a big network to start something great. You just need the drive, the vision, and the willingness to keep going even when it feels like it's not going to work out. If I can do it, so can anyone else. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, where ambition was considered a luxury and success was something most people hoped for but never really expected to achieve. I wasn't supposed to be the kind of person who would leave that small town, let alone build a business that would eventually change my life. It all started when I was 14. My family didn't have much. My parents were both blue-collar workers, and we lived paycheck to paycheck. I'd watch my dad come home exhausted after 12-hour shifts at the factory, and my mom worked double shifts at the local diner. There were a lot of days when they seemed defeated, like they'd given up on any bigger dreams. But the truth is, they never stopped working hard. They just didn't have the means or opportunities to break out of the cycle. One summer, I decided to do something about it. I didn't want to just accept the life they had. So, I started a small lawn care business. I didn't have a fancy lawnmower or equipment. I had an old push mower that I found in my neighbor's garage and a rake that I'd borrowed. I went door to door asking people if they needed help with their yards. And while most folks thought I was just a kid messing around, a few older people saw my determination and hired me. It wasn't much at first, just a few bucks here and there, but it gave me a sense of pride that I'd never felt before. As the summer went on, I began to learn about the business side of things, how to set prices, negotiate, and deliver a service that people would pay for. I had a few clients who were particularly loyal and ended up referring me to their friends. I saved up every penny I made, and by the time school started again, I had enough to buy a slightly better mower and some basic tools. It was a small win, but it was mine, and it felt like a glimpse of something bigger. High school came and went, and I stuck with the lawn care business through the years. It wasn't glamorous work, but it taught me the value of hard work, customer service, and perseverance. I never had the money or the backing to scale it into something massive, but it was my foundation, and I learned lessons that would shape my entire future. I managed to keep the business running through college while working on my degree in marketing. I figured if I could figure out how to promote my lawn business, I could figure out how to promote anything. When I graduated, I was faced with a decision. I could take a stable, safe job in marketing and climb the corporate ladder, or I could take the risk and try to do something bigger with my business. I decided to take the leap. I sold the lawn care business, which had grown significantly by that point, and used the money to launch my first real company, a small digital marketing agency focused on helping local businesses build their online presence. It was harder than I anticipated. I was young, inexperienced, and didn't know nearly as much about the digital world as I thought I did. I made mistakes left and right, misjudging budgets, promising too much, and underestimating how much work it would take to build a solid client base. For the first few months, I barely made enough to pay rent, let alone cover my bills. There were days when I'd look at my bank account and wonder if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But I refused to give up. I spent hours learning, reading articles, watching tutorials, and reaching out to people who were already in the industry. Slowly but surely, things started to click. I refined my pitch, learned how to sell effectively, and began to understand what made a great marketing campaign. It was tough, but I was slowly carving out a niche for myself. After about a year of struggle, something incredible happened. A local restaurant reached out to me to help with their online marketing. They were a small, family-owned business that had been struggling to get people through the door. I took their project on with everything I had, and after a few months of intense work, we had doubled their online traffic, helped them build a loyal following, and, most importantly, brought in a lot more customers. That success led to more clients, and soon I had a steady stream of business coming in. My agency grew from just me working out of my small apartment to a team of 5 people working out of a small office. Things were finally taking off, but it wasn't without a fair amount of stress. As my business grew, so did the challenges. Managing a team, keeping clients happy, and handling all the logistics of running a company while still trying to find time for myself felt overwhelming at times. But what kept me going was the knowledge that I was building something from the ground up, something that was entirely mine. I wasn't just working for a paycheck anymore. I was creating something that had the potential to change my life. The agency continued to grow, and by the time I was in my late 20s, we had moved into a larger office and had a client list that included some of the biggest brands in the region. But with success came a new set of challenges. Competition was fierce, and I had to stay ahead of trends and continually innovate to keep clients happy. I knew that if I wanted to truly scale, I'd need to pivot. I couldn't just keep doing the same things and expect to grow exponentially. That's when I decided to build a software platform that would automate much of the marketing process for small businesses. It was a risk, a massive one, and I knew I would need capital to develop it. I sought investors, and after a few rejections, I finally found someone who believed in my vision. Building the software wasn't easy. I had no tech background, and the development process was long and complicated. But after 2 years of hard work, we launched the platform. It wasn't perfect, but it worked, and it was exactly what small businesses needed, an affordable, easy-to-use tool that allowed them to handle their own marketing without needing a large team or a massive budget. The platform was a game-changer. It caught fire quickly, and within a year, we were acquiring thousands of new customers each month. My small digital marketing agency transformed into a full-blown tech company. We raised more money, expanded the team, and began to grow at a rate I had never imagined. Today, I run a successful tech company that helps small businesses thrive in the digital age. I've sold the marketing agency and now focus on developing our platform and expanding into new markets. The journey from a small-town kid with a push mower to running a tech company wasn't easy, but it was worth every late night, every mistake, and every moment of doubt. Looking back, I realized that the secret to success wasn't having the best idea from the start. It was about having the determination to keep going, even when it seemed impossible. Hard work, learning from failures, and never being afraid to take risks made all the difference. I may have started with nothing, but I ended up with everything I ever wanted. I'll never forget the day I made the decision to start my own business. It wasn't a grand, epiphany-filled moment where everything clicked, but rather a culmination of frustration, uncertainty, and a desperate need to escape the mundane. I'd been working a corporate job for 5 years, pretty standard stuff. Long hours, lackluster appreciation, and an overall feeling of being a cog in a machine. Every day felt like a repeat of the one before, and I was suffocating under the weight of it all. I was always the type of person to dream big. I would scroll through social media and see all these entrepreneurs posting about their success stories, their freedom, their hustle. It all sounded so glamorous, so effortless. But deep down, I knew it wasn't like that. There was a fear in me that I couldn't quite shake, the fear of failure, of not making it, of losing everything I'd worked for. But on the other hand, I also knew I couldn't keep going the way I was. The tipping point came one afternoon. I was sitting in a dull meeting room, listening to my boss drone on about projections and quarterly reports. My mind was wandering, as it often did, and my thoughts kept circling back to the idea of building something of my own. I had a small side hustle, an online store that sold unique, handcrafted items, but it was barely making a dent in my income. I wasn't ready to quit my day job just yet, but the idea of building something that could grow beyond me, something that could give me the freedom I was craving, was intoxicating. After that meeting, I sat at my desk, staring blankly at my computer screen. I had this sudden realization that I had nothing to lose. Sure, I'd be taking a huge risk, but I couldn't bear the thought of waking up in 5 years still in the same spot, stuck in a job that drained me. So, I made a decision. I was going to quit. I didn't have a clear plan, but I knew I'd figure it out along the way. I spent the next few weeks planning and researching. My side hustle, which had started as a tiny passion project, was now the focal point of everything. It wasn't a get-rich-quick scheme or some revolutionary idea. It was just something I loved doing. I'd sell custom-made leather goods, something I'd always been interested in but never fully committed to. I'd seen how popular handmade and personalized products were becoming, and I figured I could tap into that market. The decision to quit my corporate job was, without a doubt, terrifying. My parents were supportive but worried. They'd worked hard all their lives, and the idea of leaving a stable job for something uncertain didn't sit well with them. My friends, on the other hand, were excited but skeptical. They told me it would be a great adventure, but I could tell they didn't fully understand what I was getting into. I walked into the office the day I handed in my resignation letter with a mix of excitement and nausea. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my palms were sweating. I couldn't believe I was actually doing it. As I handed over the letter, I tried to act cool, like it wasn't a huge deal, but deep down, I was scared as hell. I didn't have a safety net. I didn't have investors or business partners. It was just me, my savings, and a dream. The first few months were harder than I could have imagined. My days were filled with product development, sourcing materials, creating a website, and navigating the world of social media marketing. I didn't know anything about marketing or building a brand, so I had to learn everything on the fly. I spent hours reading blogs, watching YouTube tutorials, and reaching out to other entrepreneurs for advice. The money wasn't flowing in at first. I barely made enough to cover my rent and bills. There were nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. The doubt crept in constantly. What if it didn't work? What if I couldn't make it? But every time those thoughts came up, I reminded myself why I started in the first place. This was my shot at freedom, at building something of my own. I couldn't turn back now. About 6 months into my new venture, things started to pick up. I had learned the importance of creating a brand, something that connected with people on a deeper level. My products weren't just leather goods, they were an experience. I started telling the story behind each item I made, sharing my journey, and inviting customers to be part of my story. Slowly, the orders began to come in. Not in huge quantities, but enough to keep me going. Then, the real breakthrough happened. I got a message from a well-known influencer in the handmade community. She had seen my work on Instagram and wanted to collaborate. I couldn't believe it. This was the kind of exposure I had been dreaming about. The collaboration went live, and within a few days, my website crashed from the influx of orders. It was both exhilarating and overwhelming. I was working around the clock to fulfill orders, but it felt amazing. For the first time, I saw the potential of what I was building. That collaboration opened the door to even more opportunities. I started working with other influencers, growing my social media presence, and even getting featured in a few online magazines. My business began to scale in a way I had never imagined. I went from working out of my tiny apartment to renting a small studio. As the orders grew, I hired a couple of part-time employees to help with production, and eventually, I was able to quit the side gig and focus solely on my business. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. I still have a long way to go, but the sense of fulfillment I feel now is incomparable to anything I experienced in my old job. Sure, there are still tough days when things don't go according to plan, when I feel like I'm not moving fast enough, or when I question whether I've taken on too much. But those moments are nothing compared to the excitement of building something that's all mine, that's growing, and that people care about. I've learned that entrepreneurship is not the glamorous, easy path I once thought it was. It's messy, unpredictable, and full of sacrifices. But for me, it's been worth every second, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Now, I get messages from other aspiring entrepreneurs asking how I did it, how I turned a small idea into a successful business. My answer is always the same. You just have to start. You won't have all the answers at first, and you'll make mistakes along the way. But if you're passionate and persistent, you'll figure it out. The road won't be easy, but it'll be worth it. It's been 2 years since I made that leap, and I'm more proud of what I built than anything I've ever done in my life. I still pinch myself sometimes, wondering how I got here. But the truth is, it wasn't luck. It was a decision to take a chance, to get uncomfortable, and to keep going, even when things got tough. If you're reading this and wondering if you should take that leap yourself, I can only say one thing: go for it. You'll never know until you try. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I never thought I'd be the type of person to get into the whole entrepreneurship thing. Growing up, I wasn't the kid who sold lemonade on the street corner, nor was I the one running a hustle in high school. I was a quiet, focused kid who kept to myself. My dream, back then, was to become a software engineer. The thought of owning a business or taking on huge risks was far from my mind. But life has a funny way of pushing you in directions you never expect. It all started in my mid-20s. I had just landed a stable job at a tech company in a medium-sized city. Everything seemed set. I had a reliable paycheck, benefits, and the standard corporate job perks. The only issue? I hated it. I wasn't doing anything that inspired me. I wasn't passionate about the work I was doing, and the whole office environment drained me. But I had this voice inside my head that kept saying, "Stick it out. You're lucky to have a job. People would kill for this." And yet, every morning, as I dragged myself out of bed to go to work, I felt a sense of dread. I knew deep down that I wasn't meant to be sitting in front of a screen for the rest of my life, debugging code for software I didn't even care about. One evening, I was having dinner with my older brother. He was a small business owner, and I had always admired his entrepreneurial spirit. We started talking about the growing tech industry, and I mentioned how disillusioned I was with my current job. "Why don't you do something for yourself?" he asked. His words struck me like a bolt of lightning. Do something for myself? The thought had never really crossed my mind before. Sure, I dabbled in side projects, but the idea of actually starting my own company was far too daunting. At that moment, he told me about a small, tech-related idea he had in mind. He had been working on it for a few months, but he wasn't sure how to take it to the next level. He asked me if I'd be willing to help. I wasn't sure what I could offer, but something in me clicked. I realized I had the skills to help him build this idea out. We could start something small, manageable, and if it didn't work, we could move on. After a few more conversations, we decided to dive in. We took the leap and started the company together. Our first project was modest, a simple mobile app designed to help local businesses connect with customers more efficiently. The idea wasn't revolutionary, but it was something we thought could make a difference. We bootstrapped the entire thing, working late nights and weekends while still holding down our full-time jobs. The first few months were brutal. We hit so many roadblocks. The app kept crashing, our marketing strategies weren't working, and our funds were dwindling. My brother and I would stay up late, frantically trying to fix bugs or figure out a new approach to get users. There were moments when I honestly thought about quitting, especially after our first marketing campaign fell flat. We had spent a significant amount of our savings on ads that didn't bring in a single user. It felt like we were running in circles. But something strange started happening. We began to get a few users here and there. They were small businesses that appreciated the value our app brought. Word of mouth started to spread. We couldn't believe it, but people were actually paying for our service. Slowly, we started to grow. I'll never forget the moment when we got our first big break. We had just finished updating the app, and my brother got an email from a regional business association that wanted to partner with us. They were looking for tech solutions for their members, and they thought our app could be a great fit. They offered us a deal to promote our app to hundreds of businesses in the area. We were ecstatic, but we were also terrified. We didn't have the infrastructure to support such a huge demand. We knew we needed to act fast if we didn't want to mess up this opportunity. We pulled all-nighters for weeks, updating the app, improving customer service, and preparing for the influx of users. It felt like everything was coming to a head, and we couldn't afford to fail. We launched the partnership, and it was a game changer. Our user base exploded, and we were suddenly in a position where we could quit our day jobs and focus on the company full-time. I remember handing in my resignation letter with a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was it. There was no turning back now. The next year was a blur. We grew quickly, hiring a small team to help us with the app, customer support, and marketing. We expanded our features and started offering more services. But with growth came new challenges. Our team dynamics changed, the pressure mounted, and there were growing pains as we learned how to run a business. There were moments where I thought we might crumble under the weight of it all. But somehow, we managed to keep going. We built relationships with investors, we refined our product, and we learned how to manage the day-to-day operations of a growing business. As the months went on, the app gained more traction, and we started to see real revenue. Our small startup was becoming something bigger than we had ever imagined. Looking back, I can't believe how far we've come. What started as a side project has now turned into a successful company. We're still a long way from the vision we have, but we've built something that I'm proud of. There are days when I think about how different my life could have been if I hadn't taken that first step with my brother. If I hadn't decided to leave my comfortable, soul-draining job and take a risk. I still feel a sense of unease at times, but it's a different kind of unease, the kind that comes from knowing that everything is in my hands, that the decisions I make can shape the future of the company. There's no clear path to success in entrepreneurship. It's messy, chaotic, and filled with failure. But there's something exhilarating about creating something from nothing and knowing that, despite all the odds, you made it happen. The most important lesson I've learned from all of this is that you can never be afraid to take that first step. If you're passionate about something and you believe in it, it's worth trying, even if you fail. Because in the end, failure isn't the end. It's just part of the process. And you can always learn and try again. The key is to keep going. Would I have started this journey on my own? Probably not. Having my brother by my side was the secret ingredient to our success. We complemented each other's strengths and weaknesses, and together, we built something neither of us could have done alone. So, if you're sitting in a job you hate, feeling like you're stuck, and that you'll never get out, remember this. You don't have to stay there. It's never too late to start something new, and it doesn't matter how small your idea may seem at first. It just takes one decision, one leap of faith, and a lot of hard work. You can do it. Don't let fear hold you back. I was 26 when I first started my business, and to be honest, I had no clue what I was doing. My background was in graphic design, but I wasn't exactly thriving. I was working for a small agency and making decent money, but something felt off. I had no time to pursue the projects I truly cared about, no room to grow, and I was stuck in a cycle of client work that didn't ignite my passion. I always knew I wanted to do my own thing, but I thought it would be something far less intimidating, like freelancing or starting a side hustle. In 2017, I started thinking about this idea of creating custom apparel. It wasn't some groundbreaking revelation, but I saw a gap in the market. There were brands selling t-shirts, hoodies, and hats, but none of them were offering a fully personalized experience where you could design exactly what you wanted and get it shipped to your door. I figured I could create a platform where people could upload their own artwork, select styles, colors, and sizes, and have it printed and delivered directly to them. It felt like something that could work, and most importantly, I was excited about it. I had about $3,000 saved up from working at the agency. Not a huge amount, but enough to get started if I was careful. I decided to quit my job, take the plunge, and focus full-time on this idea. I spent the first few weeks researching the best print-on-demand platforms, designing a simple website, and drafting a business plan. The first lesson I learned was that starting a business is nowhere near as glamorous as people make it seem. It was a lot of late nights, trial and error, and constant learning. I spent hours on Google looking up terms I didn't understand and trying to decipher business jargon. And all that time, I wasn't making any money. It was nerve-wracking. In the beginning, I made every mistake in the book. I picked a print-on-demand supplier that was unreliable. Some of my customers' orders arrived late or with the wrong design, which led to angry emails, refunds, and a lot of stress. I also realized that I didn't understand marketing at all. I built this website, but no one was visiting it. I thought that by simply creating a good product, people would magically find it. Spoiler, they didn't. I had to learn the hard way that having a good product doesn't mean much if no one knows about it. So I started learning about digital marketing, SEO, social media advertising, email campaigns, influencer collaborations. It was a slow burn, The first month after I launched, I made $300 in sales. Not nearly enough to cover my expenses, but it was something. By the third month, I was making around $2,000 in revenue, but still not enough to pay myself a consistent salary. I was working day and night, constantly tweaking the website, adjusting my ads, and trying to build a social media presence. I still wasn't sure I was doing everything right, but I knew I couldn't give up now. What really changed things for me was Instagram. I started using it not just as a platform to promote my products, but as a way to connect with my audience. I began posting behind-the-scenes content, sharing stories of customers who received their custom gear, and featuring some of the more unique designs that people submitted. Slowly, people started to notice. They liked what they saw, and more importantly, they shared it with their own followers. I began to grow a community of like-minded individuals who loved the idea of personalized apparel. By the 6-month mark, my sales had increased to $10,000 a month, and I could finally pay myself a small salary. I was able to move into a co-working space, hire a part-time assistant, and expand my product line. The first big win came when a popular Instagram influencer reached out to me, wanting to collaborate. It wasn't just any influencer, it was someone whose style aligned perfectly with my brand, and I couldn't believe it. I sent her some custom pieces, and within a week, she posted about them. The response was overwhelming. Sales spiked, and I was getting flooded with new orders. This was the moment when I finally started to believe that this business could actually go somewhere. The next year was a whirlwind of growth. I scaled my advertising, worked with more influencers, and focused on building a recognizable brand. I also expanded the range of products I offered, adding everything from custom mugs and phone cases to tote bags and socks. I took a big risk and hired a full-time employee to help with customer service and fulfillment. That was a nerve-wracking decision, but it paid off. With more hands on deck, I was able to focus on growing the business rather than getting caught up in day-to-day operations. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. In 2019, I faced one of my biggest challenges. My supplier, the one I had been using for print-on-demand services, suddenly increased their prices by 40%. They claimed it was due to rising material costs, but for a small business like mine, that was a huge blow. I had to decide whether to absorb the cost and reduce my margin or pass it on to the customer. Neither option was ideal, but I chose to raise my prices slightly. I communicated the change to my customers and explained the reason behind it. Thankfully, they were understanding and most didn't mind the price increase. That was a turning point. I realized that running a business is about constant adaptation. You can't just sit back and expect things to stay the same. You have to be willing to pivot, learn from your mistakes, and take risks. Over the years, I continued to learn more about business, especially about finances and scaling. I invested in learning how to delegate tasks, manage my cash flow, and expand my team when necessary. I realized that success didn't come from doing everything myself. It came from building a great team, creating a strong brand, and delivering a product that people genuinely loved. Fast forward to today, and my business is making 6 figures annually. I've hired a full team of designers, marketers, and customer service reps. I've expanded to international markets, and we've launched a second, larger production facility to handle the volume. What started as a $3,000 side project has turned into a full-fledged business. And while it's been a challenging, exhausting, and sometimes discouraging journey, I wouldn't trade it for anything. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that entrepreneurship is not about having the perfect plan or knowing everything from the start. It's about persistence, learning from mistakes, and being willing to adapt. There are still days when I wonder if I'm doing everything right, but I've learned to trust the process. It's not a straight line to success. It's full of twists, turns, and bumps along the way. But if you're willing to put in the work, it can be incredibly rewarding. I'm still far from where I want to be, but looking back, I'm proud of how far I've come. I'm doing what I love, and I'm building something that I believe in. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. I never thought I would end up where I am now. From living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to make ends meet, to running a successful business, my journey has been full of unexpected twists and turns. If you had told me a few years ago that I would be a thriving entrepreneur, I would have laughed in your face. But here I am, and I want to share my story in the hopes that it might inspire someone who feels like they're stuck in a rut, just like I was. Let me start from the beginning. I grew up in a working-class family in a small town. My parents worked hard to provide for me and my 2 siblings, but we never had much. I remember constantly hearing things like, money doesn't grow on trees, and you need to work hard if you want to get anywhere in life. While I understood the importance of hard work, I always felt like there had to be more to life than just grinding away at a 9 to 5 job, day after day, with little to show for it. After high school, I went to college, but I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. I started off in business, then switched to marketing, then switched again to graphic design. I could never find something that truly sparked my passion. I graduated with a degree in design, but the job market was tough, and I ended up taking a minimum wage job at a local coffee shop. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. During this time, I began to notice something. People around me were constantly talking about their side hustles. Some were making money from freelance gigs, others were selling products online, and some had even started their own small businesses. I started thinking, maybe I could do that too. I was a creative person, and I loved designing things. So, I started creating digital art, mostly logos, illustrations, and templates, and selling them on platforms like Etsy and Fiverr. It wasn't much at first, but it was a start. I spent my free time in the coffee shop working on my designs, honing my skills, and learning about digital marketing. I devoured every free resource I could find about SEO, social media marketing, and building an online business. Slowly but surely, my small side hustle began to grow. I got my first few clients on Fiverr, and I started to feel a sense of pride in my work that I had never experienced before. But as I started to see some success, I also began to realize something important. I was limited by time. There were only so many hours in the day, and as much as I loved my side hustle, I couldn't scale it beyond a certain point while working full-time at the coffee shop. I had to make a decision: continue working at the coffee shop while slowly building my freelance business on the side, or take the leap and go all in on my business. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. I had no savings, no backup plan, and no guarantees that my business would succeed. But something inside me told me that if I didn't take the risk now, I would always wonder, what if? So, I quit my job at the coffee shop and went all in on my business. The first few months were rough. I had no income and no safety net. But I was determined. I kept creating designs, improving my skills, and reaching out to potential clients. Slowly but surely, I started to build a small client base. Then, one day, I got a big break. A well-known influencer reached out to me for a project. It was the opportunity one had been waiting for. I poured everything I had into the project, making sure it was perfect. When the work was finished, the influencer posted it on their social media, and that's when everything changed. The exposure was massive. Suddenly, I had people reaching out to me for collaborations, partnerships, and commissions. My business exploded overnight. I began hiring other designers to help me keep up with the demand, and I started building a team. The money started rolling in, and I finally felt like I was on the right track. But even though I was making money, I knew that success didn't just come from having a lot of clients or raking in cash. It came from creating value and being able to make an impact. So, I began thinking bigger. I started an online course, teaching people how to create their own digital art and run a successful freelance business. It was a risk, but it paid off. People loved the course, and I started generating passive income from it. Over the next couple of years, my business grew exponentially. I expanded into different niches, offered new products and services, and reached customers all over the world. But success wasn't just about the money, it was about the freedom I gained. I could work from anywhere, set my own schedule, and have control over my life in a way I had never imagined. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were countless challenges along the way, dealing with difficult clients, managing a growing team, navigating the ups and downs of the market, and battling self-doubt. But through it all, I kept pushing forward, reminding myself that I was in control of my own destiny. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. My business is thriving, and I'm doing work that I love every day. I've been able to travel, buy a house, and have the kind of life I used to only dream about. But more than that, I've learned that the key to success is not just about working hard. It's about being willing to take risks, being persistent, and believing in yourself even when others don't. If there's one thing I've learned from my journey, it's that success isn't handed to you on a silver platter. It's earned through hard work, perseverance, and a willingness to take risks. If you're in a place where you feel stuck, just know that it's possible to turn things around. Don't let fear hold you back. Take that leap, and who knows? Maybe one day you'll look back and realize that the hardest decision you ever made was the best one you ever made. I'm living proof that it's never too late to chase your dreams and build the life you want. The journey is tough, but it's worth it. Keep going. I always knew I was destined for something big. I wasn't born into a wealthy family, and I didn't have any special connections. But I had one thing that I believed would take me further than anything else, an unshakable drive. Growing up in a small town, my parents worked hard to make ends meet. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom worked as a cashier at the local grocery store. They weren't rich, but they taught me the value of hard work, discipline, and perseverance. However, as much as I appreciated their work ethic, I never wanted to be stuck in a job where I was exchanging my time for a paycheck. I had bigger dreams. My first brush with entrepreneurship came when I was 15. I had this old lawnmower lying around in the garage, and after seeing how expensive it was for people to hire someone to mow their lawns, I decided to try my hand at it. I printed out flyers, offering lawn mowing services for a cheaper price than anyone else in town. I went door to door handing them out, and surprisingly, a few people actually called me. The first job was a disaster. I didn't know how to properly start the mower, the grass kept clogging up, and it took me way longer than expected. But I stuck with it. I learned more about lawn care, bought a better mower, and started offering other services like hedge trimming and garden maintenance. By the time I was 18, I had a small team working for me, and we were handling residential and commercial properties around the town. It wasn't a fortune, but it was my first taste of business success. I had learned that the key to entrepreneurship was identifying problems people needed solved and finding ways to offer solutions that were better or cheaper than what they were already getting. After high school, I went to college to study business. It was there that I discovered a passion for tech startups. I started to realize that the future wasn't in physical labor, but in digital products and services. I also quickly learned that everyone in the startup world was trying to create the next big app. So, I decided to do the opposite. Instead of going for the popular app-based business, I created a website that helped local businesses set up their own online stores. At first, it was just me coding late into the night, working on a simple platform that allowed small businesses to easily build e-commerce sites. I didn't have any investors, no rich friends to lean on, just a strong belief in the idea. I started with my hometown businesses, mom-and-pop shops that needed to catch up with the digital age. The first few customers were skeptical, and I was nervous, but I did everything I could to make their online stores work. Within 6 months, the word started to spread, and I began landing more clients. I realized that small businesses were starving for the kind of easy-to-use, affordable e-commerce platform I was offering. As my client base grew, I hired a couple of friends from college who were proficient in coding and marketing. We worked day and night to improve the platform and keep up with demand. But then came the challenges. As I expanded, I realized that our platform wasn't scalable enough for larger businesses. Our servers crashed multiple times, and clients started complaining. I was devastated. We had been growing fast, but we were also teetering on the edge of failure. I could have given up, but I didn't. I spent hours reading about infrastructure, networking with tech professionals, and learning what I could do to fix our back-end systems. I invested all the money I had saved up into better servers and hired experts to help us rewrite the code to scale properly. It was a risky move. If this didn't work, I'd be back at square one with nothing to show for it. But it worked. Once our system was stable, I started reaching out to larger businesses, promising them that we could offer them a better and more cost-effective solution than the major players in the market. It took time, but eventually the bigger clients started to come on board. That's when things really started to take off. We started generating enough revenue to improve our product even further, and my team and I worked tirelessly to add more features and enhance the user experience. However, just as things were looking up, we faced another problem: competition. Other e-commerce platforms began popping up everywhere, and some of them were backed by big investors with huge marketing budgets. I remember feeling the pressure, but instead of worrying, I focused on what we could do better. We started offering personalized customer service, 24/7 support, and additional resources to help our clients succeed. We were smaller, but we were also more agile, and I believed that would make all the difference. At one point, we even faced a major setback. Our top competitors were poaching some of our best employees, luring them with big paychecks. It was hard, especially since some of them were friends. But it was also a wake-up call. If we wanted to survive and grow, we had to find a way to build a company culture that people wanted to be a part of. We offered our employees more freedom, a flexible work environment, and equity in the company. We also started providing training programs to help them develop their skills and grow within the company. By the time I was 30, our platform was one of the most well-known e-commerce solutions for small businesses. We had expanded internationally, and our team had grown to over 100 employees. We were making millions in revenue, but more importantly, we had created a product that helped thousands of small businesses thrive. In the end, it wasn't just about the money or the success. It was about solving problems, providing value, and building a company that people loved. Looking back, I realized that every single setback I faced, every failure, every sleepless night, every challenge was a part of the process. If I hadn't faced those moments, I wouldn't have learned the lessons that allowed me to build something bigger than myself. Now, I'm often asked by young entrepreneurs what the secret to success is. Honestly, it's simple: resilience. There will always be people who doubt you. There will always be roadblocks, and there will always be moments when you feel like giving up. But if you push through, learn from your failures, and keep innovating, you can build something amazing. It's not easy, but if it were, everyone would do it. And I wouldn't have the satisfaction of looking back and knowing I built this from nothing. I never thought I'd end up where I am today. Growing up in a small town in the middle of nowhere, the idea of entrepreneurship seemed like something reserved for people who had access to resources, connections, and knowledge that I just didn't have. I wasn't born into wealth. In fact, my family struggled to make ends meet. My parents worked hard to give me a shot at a better life, but they weren't the kind of people who could offer guidance on how to build a business. They knew how to work hard, but not how to work smart. In high school, I was the quiet kid who didn't quite fit in. I was good at math and science, but I had no clear direction. I didn't know if I wanted to be an engineer, a doctor, or something entirely different. But I did know one thing: I wasn't going to spend my life working for someone else. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was destined to do something bigger. But what? And how? After graduating, I decided to attend college on a scholarship. The first few years were rough. I wasn't surrounded by like-minded people, and I often felt lost in a sea of students who knew exactly what they wanted to do. Then, during my junior year, something changed. One of my professors, a no-nonsense guy who had worked in the tech industry before becoming a professor, gave a lecture on the power of disruption. He spoke about companies that had changed the world by thinking outside the box, and I suddenly realized that disruption wasn't just something that happened, it was something that you could create. It was in that moment that the seed was planted. I started researching successful entrepreneurs, reading books, and watching interviews with people like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos. I realized that while they had extraordinary talents, what set them apart was their ability to see opportunities where others saw problems. They weren't just solving issues, they were transforming entire industries. With that newfound understanding, I began brainstorming. But there was a problem: I didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted to do. I couldn't pinpoint a groundbreaking idea like the ones I'd read about. But I didn't give up. I started small, talking to friends and family, and looking for issues that people complained about daily. It wasn't glamorous, but I was determined to find something that I could solve. During my senior year, I had an internship at a small tech startup. It wasn't the most prestigious company, but it was enough to get my foot in the door. There, I saw firsthand what it meant to run a business. I watched as the team struggled to balance customer demands, development timelines, and cash flow. But I also saw moments of brilliance, when a team member would come up with an idea that completely shifted the direction of a project, or when the founders found a way to stretch a small budget further than anyone thought possible. That was the first time I saw entrepreneurship up close, and I knew I was hooked. After college, I was offered a job at a big corporation, but something inside me told me I couldn't take it. I wanted to take the leap. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I couldn't live with the regret of never trying. So, I started my own business, a mobile app development company. It was a simple idea, something I thought I could execute well. An app that helps small businesses streamline their customer interactions. It wasn't revolutionary, but it had potential. I didn't have much capital to start with, and I didn't want to ask for money from my parents. I believed in the idea enough that I took out a small loan, the kind that made you sweat at night just thinking about paying it back. I rented a small office, bought a laptop, and got to work. The first few months were a blur of coding, designing, and pitching to anyone who would listen. I barely slept, but I was fueled by a sense of purpose that I hadn't experienced before. I quickly learned that the hardest part wasn't creating the app, it was getting people to use it. I remember cold calling dozens of small business owners, pitching my app, only to be met with rejection after rejection. I felt like I was hitting a wall every day, but I refused to quit. I knew that if I kept going, I'd eventually find the right people. Then, one day, I got a break. A small local bakery reached out to me after seeing my app advertised in a local business newsletter. They were struggling with managing their orders and customer communication, and after a short demo, they decided to give it a try. It was a huge win, but more importantly, it was proof that there was a market for what I was doing. From there, things started to snowball. Other small businesses started reaching out, and my app began gaining traction. I hired my first employee, a developer who helped me improve the app's functionality, and we launched an updated version with new features. The response was overwhelming. People were actually using it, and businesses were seeing real value. The more I grew, the more I realized that this wasn't just about building an app. It was about helping people solve real problems. Fast forward to today, and my company has grown far beyond what I ever expected. We've expanded into other markets, and I now employ a team of over 50 people. We've secured funding from investors and partnered with larger companies to integrate our app into their systems. But the journey hasn't been without its challenges. There have been moments when I thought it was all going to fall apart, when deals fell through, when customers complained, or when I made mistakes that cost us time and money. But I've learned that failure is part of the process. Every setback is an opportunity to learn, adjust, and grow stronger. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. I went from being the kid who didn't know what he wanted to do to the founder of a successful business. And while the road hasn't been easy, I wouldn't trade any of it. Because in the end, entrepreneurship isn't just about making money, it's about creating something that has the potential to make a difference in the world. And that, to me, is the greatest reward of all. Now, I'm in a position to mentor other aspiring entrepreneurs, to share the lessons I've learned along the way, and to give back to the community that helped me get to where I am. I'll never forget where I started, and I'll never stop pushing myself to go further. Because the truth is, this journey is far from over. It's only just begun. I never thought a failed college semester would lead me to a thriving business, but here I am today, looking back at how a small idea became a multi-million-dollar company. It all started when I was in my sophomore year of college. I had always been the type to do well in school. I was a straight-A student, loved learning, and had big dreams of becoming a lawyer or something prestigious. But life, as it often does, threw me a curveball. That semester, I was taking a particularly tough course load, and I found myself struggling to keep up. I was taking business law, a few general education classes, and even an advanced economics class. But the one that got me was a small marketing class that was outside of my major, meant to fulfill a requirement. The professor was tough, and I just couldn't grasp some of the concepts he was teaching. When the midterm came around, I failed. Badly. That failure hit me hard. I had never failed at anything before, and it made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. I didn't want to admit it, but I was crushed. My confidence took a serious hit. For a while, I thought about quitting school altogether, but something inside me told me to take a step back and think. I went through a few weeks of soul-searching, during which I tried to understand what had gone wrong. I realized I had been so focused on doing well in school and following the traditional path to success that I had overlooked something: my own creativity and entrepreneurial spirit. I didn't want to work for anyone else, and deep down, I wanted to start my own business. The problem was, I had no idea what kind of business. One evening, after sitting in my dorm room feeling sorry for myself, I did something unusual. I Googled business ideas, just to see what popped up. After scrolling through countless pages of articles and ideas, one thing stood out: e-commerce. The idea of selling things online seemed so simple, yet I had never really considered it before. I had no experience in e-commerce, and I didn't have much money, but I was determined to make it work. So, I started small. I did some research on different products that were trending, trying to find a niche that I could focus on. I came across something that piqued my interest: eco-friendly products. At the time, sustainability was becoming a buzzword, and I thought it would be smart to tap into a growing market. I spent the next few weeks obsessing over this idea. I learned everything I could about dropshipping, building websites, and running online ads. I also reached out to manufacturers of eco-friendly products, asking if I could sell their products online. To my surprise, a few of them agreed to work with me. I had no inventory, no business experience, and barely any capital, but I was hungry and determined. I launched my website, which was clunky and basic, and started running ads on Facebook. The first few weeks were discouraging. I barely made any sales. But I kept tweaking my website, adjusting my marketing strategies, and learning from my mistakes. I knew it would take time, but I had to keep going. The turning point came when I decided to focus more on social media marketing. I started an Instagram page for my business, posting about sustainability, eco-friendly products, and simple lifestyle tips. Slowly, people started noticing. One day, I woke up to find that one of my Instagram posts had gone viral. It wasn't anything special, just a simple photo of a bamboo toothbrush next to a succulent plant, but the post had been shared thousands of times. My website traffic exploded, and my sales began to rise. That was the moment I realized this could actually work. Over the next few months, my business continued to grow. I reinvested every penny I made back into the company, improving my website, expanding my product line, and scaling my marketing efforts. The more I learned, the more I was able to optimize everything. I eventually hired a few freelancers to help me with customer service, social media management, and order fulfillment. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of sleepless nights, but I was seeing the results. By the end of my junior year, my e-commerce business had made 6 figures in revenue. I was still in college, still attending classes, but my focus had shifted. I realized that what I had started as a side hustle was now my full-time passion. I was no longer sure about the whole lawyer thing. I had become an entrepreneur, and I was loving every second of it. The turning point came when I was faced with a tough decision. Should I continue my education and graduate with a degree, or should I fully commit to my business? It was a dilemma that caused me a lot of stress. My parents, who had always supported my education, were hesitant about the idea of me leaving school before completing my degree. But I knew that if I didn't go all in, I would always wonder, what if? So, I made the decision to drop out of college. It was a huge risk, and I knew it would be met with criticism from some people, but I followed my gut. I hired a full-time team, rented office space, and began scaling my business in ways I hadn't thought possible. I focused on expanding my product offerings and strengthening my brand identity. By the end of my first year as a full-time entrepreneur, my business was generating 7 figures annually. Looking back, I still can't believe how far I've come. There were so many moments of doubt and uncertainty, but I kept going. My story is not one of overnight success. It was a long journey filled with failures, setbacks, and moments of self-doubt. But those failures didn't define me. They pushed me to become better, smarter, and more resilient. My advice to anyone considering entrepreneurship is simple: don't be afraid to fail. The road to success is never linear, but if you're willing to learn from your mistakes and keep going, you can make something incredible out of even the most unlikely circumstances. As for me, my business is now worth several $1,000,000, and I have plans to expand into new markets. I can't help but think back to that failed semester in college. It was the catalyst for everything that followed, and if I hadn't stumbled, I might never have found the courage to follow my true calling. Sometimes, failure is the best thing that can happen to you. It just depends on how you choose to react to it. So here I am, grateful for the challenges and setbacks that have brought me to this point. I took a risk, embraced failure, and found success in a way I never could have imagined. And the journey is just getting started. I had always been a dreamer. Ever since I was a kid, I would sit in my room with a notebook, scribbling ideas for businesses, inventions, and ways to change the world. I would daydream about success, wealth, and the life I'd always imagined for myself. However, when I graduated from college, reality hit hard. I wasn't some business genius. I was just another recent graduate with a degree in communications and a vague understanding of how the business world worked. I had to figure out my next steps, but it wasn't easy. The job market was rough. I ended up taking a low-paying marketing job at a small firm that didn't even offer benefits. The commute was brutal, the work felt like a never-ending grind, and I realized quickly that I was trading my time for money and losing my sense of purpose. Every day felt like I was stuck in neutral, just moving from one day to the next with no real progress. That's when I got the idea that would eventually change everything. One night, after a particularly draining day at work, I was scrolling through Instagram, as I often did to unwind. I noticed a trend. People were posting about side hustles, small businesses they were running from home or on the side of their day jobs. Some were selling handmade goods, others were offering digital products or services. I had heard of this kind of thing before, but never really took it seriously. But that night, something clicked. I had an idea that had been simmering in the back of my mind for years. What if I could combine my passion for design with my skills in marketing and create something valuable for others? The idea was to create a personalized, custom design planner. There were tons of planners out there, but none of them felt personal, meaningful, or customizable enough for the busy person who wanted something more. I had always been obsessed with productivity tools, and I knew there had to be a way to create something that would resonate with people. The next morning, I couldn't shake the idea. I spent my lunch breaks researching how to make this happen, and after about a week, I had a rough business plan in place. I would design and sell custom planners that were personalized to each individual's needs. Customers could choose layouts, colors, and even add motivational quotes that were meaningful to them. I didn't have much money to start. My savings were minimal, and the thought of taking out a loan terrified me. So, I decided to start small. I would design a few sample planners, set up an Instagram account, and see if anyone would be interested. I spent nights and weekends teaching myself everything I needed to know: how to design the planners, how to set up an e-commerce site, and how to market my product. The first few weeks were a blur. I posted constantly on Instagram, using hashtags like #PlannerAddict and #OrganizationJunkie, hoping to catch the attention of people who were into productivity tools. I reached out to influencers in the planning community, offering them free planners in exchange for posts about my product. Slowly but surely, I started to gain traction. Then, one day, I woke up to an email that would change everything. It was from a well-known influencer in the productivity space, someone with over 100,000 followers. She had seen one of my posts and wanted to collaborate. I couldn't believe it. This was the break I had been waiting for. I immediately agreed, sending her a customized planner in the hopes that it would lead to some exposure. A week later, she posted about my product, and the response was overwhelming. I sold over 50 planners in a single day. That was the moment I realized I was onto something. But that was just the beginning. With the sudden influx of orders, I quickly realized how much I had underestimated the logistics of running a business. I had to figure out how to scale, manage inventory, and keep up with customer service. At first, it felt like a constant fire drill. There were times when I thought I was going to burn out. But I kept pushing forward, learning from my mistakes and making adjustments as I went. I began to invest more money into advertising and reached out to more influencers. I also started experimenting with different designs and product lines, from wall calendars to digital planners. As the brand grew, I started to hire people, first a virtual assistant to help with customer service, then a graphic designer to help create new designs. Eventually, I was able to quit my day job, and within a year, my side hustle had turned into a full-time business. Looking back, the journey wasn't easy. There were so many late nights, so many times I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. There were failures along the way, product designs that didn't sell, marketing campaigns that flopped, and mistakes I had to learn from the hard way. But through it all, I kept my focus on the end goal. Now, my business generates 6 figures in revenue each year, and I have a team of 10 people working with me. I've expanded into new markets and have even started to offer online courses on productivity and time management. I've had the chance to speak at conferences, and my brand has gained recognition in the entrepreneurial space. The thing I'm most proud of, though, is the community I've built. The people who buy my planners aren't just customers, they're part of a movement, a group of like-minded individuals who value productivity, organization, and self-improvement. And that's something I never could have predicted when I was just a kid dreaming in my room. If there's one thing I've learned from this whole experience, it's that success doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, one that requires hard work, perseverance, and a willingness to learn from mistakes. But most importantly, it requires belief in yourself, even when things get tough. So, if you're reading this and you're sitting on an idea, don't wait for the perfect moment. Take that first step. Start small, learn as you go, and keep pushing forward. You never know where it might take you. I was 22, fresh out of college, and had no idea what I was doing with my life. I had the usual post-graduation anxiety. No job lined up, no clear direction, just a stack of student loans and a part-time job at a coffee shop. But one thing I knew for sure was that I didn't want to end up working for someone else forever. I had dreams of building something from the ground up, creating a business, and eventually achieving that sweet taste of independence. But at that point, I had no clue what kind of business to start. I didn't have the experience, the money, or the connections to get things rolling. I tried thinking of ideas, but nothing clicked. I kept asking myself, what can I do with what I know? What problem can I solve that hasn't been solved yet? But after months of brainstorming and nothing substantial, I found myself back in that same dead-end coffee shop job. One fateful afternoon, a regular customer, Tom, walked in. He was a businessman who was always dressed in crisp suits and had an air of confidence about him. I had served him countless times before, but this time he struck up a conversation. We chatted casually, and I mentioned how I was struggling to find my footing and didn't know what direction to take in life. To my surprise, he didn't brush me off like most people would have. Instead, he listened carefully and offered some advice. You know, he said, the key to entrepreneurship isn't just about finding an idea. It's about identifying a gap in the market. You see problems everywhere. People don't even realize that the problems they have can be turned into opportunities. You just have to look at things differently. That conversation stuck with me. I started thinking about the gaps in my own life, the inconveniences, the annoyances, and the little problems that I face daily. And then it hit me. I was working in a coffee shop, serving people every day, and something that always frustrated me was the lack of efficiency in ordering. The line at the counter was always long, people were in a rush, and there was a lot of wasted time waiting for coffee. That's when I thought, what if I could create an app that allows customers to order ahead, skip the line, and just pick up their coffee when they get there? I know it sounds basic now, but at the time, it seemed revolutionary. I knew it wasn't a completely new idea, but I could execute it in a way that was more efficient and user-friendly than what was currently available. The idea started to consume me. Every moment of my free time was spent thinking about how I could turn this idea into something real. But I was still broke, with no savings, and I didn't know the first thing about app development. So, I did what any sensible person would do. I Googled it. I spent countless hours reading blogs, watching YouTube tutorials, and attending free webinars on app development. I learned how apps worked, what tools were used to build them, and how much it would cost. I even learned some basic coding on my own. I was determined to make it happen. But I quickly realized that even with all the knowledge I was gaining, I would need money to get this thing off the ground. I was still stuck in my part-time job, making just enough to pay rent and survive. So, I began saving. I cut back on everything. No more going out with friends. No more eating out. I started living on a shoestring budget, making every dollar count. 6 months later, I had saved up $5,000. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I reached out to a freelance app developer I found on a forum, and we started talking about how much it would cost to create my app. To my shock, they quoted me $4,000 to build the app, less than I had anticipated, but still a huge chunk of my savings. The developer sent me a contract, and with no hesitation, I signed it. I was all in. The next few months were a blur. There were late-night calls with the developer, brainstorming sessions where I would come up with new features and design ideas, and countless iterations of the app. It wasn't smooth sailing. There were bugs, delays, and times when I thought about giving up. But I kept pushing forward. After what felt like an eternity, the app was ready for launch. I had no idea if it would succeed, but I felt a surge of pride seeing it on the App Store. I spent the next several weeks marketing it, reaching out to coffee shops, and pitching my idea to them. Most of them turned me down, saying they weren't interested in adding another app to their systems. But I didn't give up. I kept knocking on doors, refining my pitch, and pushing through rejection. Then, one day, I got a call from a small, local chain of coffee shops. They were intrigued by my idea and wanted to give it a try. I was ecstatic. I worked closely with them to integrate the app into their system, and the launch went smoothly. The customers loved the convenience of ordering ahead, skipping the line, and having their coffee ready when they arrived. It was everything I had hoped for. But the real breakthrough came when I got a call from a much bigger coffee chain. They had heard about my app from one of their local stores and were interested in using it in their locations. The contract they offered was more than I had ever imagined. I couldn't believe it. My dream of creating a business was finally coming true. Over the next year, I scaled my app, adding new features and partnering with more coffee shops. My revenue grew, and I was able to hire a small team to help me manage the business. Eventually, I sold the company for a significant profit to a larger tech firm that wanted to integrate my app into their suite of services. Looking back, I never would have imagined that my journey would take me from serving coffee to selling a successful startup. It wasn't easy, and there were many times I wanted to quit. But I kept pushing forward, and now I get to do what I love every day. If I could offer one piece of advice to anyone who's struggling to find their path, it's to keep looking for opportunities, no matter how small or insignificant they may seem. The best ideas often come from the most unexpected places. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.